Hey everybody, I'm Yvonne Williams with Back to Earth Creations, and in this video I'm going to show y'all how to make your very own steampunk polymer clay cabochons. So let's get started. To create this project, I recommend using a Primo Sculpey or Kato polymer clay. Both of those brands are very strong and easy to work with. I have them passed through on the thickest setting of my pasta machine. You can actually see this was secondary scrap clay. It already has some glitter and things mixed into it from previous projects, and that's perfectly fine. And I'm going to be showing y'all how to get this very cool like steampunk pattern, though you can also do it just as well with Celtic knotwork or any kind of stamp that you have. Now what's unique about this to my previous stamping videos is I'm actually using leatherworking tools. These are 3D stamps, and then I also have a selection of little stamps in this style. There'll be links to all the different tools and materials down below. Now, a recommendation, these two stamps are very similar, but not entirely certain why. This one works way better than this one on polymer clay. So that's kind of something to keep in mind, and I think it's because this one has a little bit of a recess into it, whereas this one is just kind of a blunt surface. Now, if you have both, feel free to use both and experiment, but I have a preference towards the 3D stamp. Now, 3D stamps often come in kits, and you can see here, this is a Tandy Leather brand Celtic stamp set, and they typically will have a handle that's like this, that will just pop right into the stamp. And you can use these, but I have a preference both with polymer clay and leatherworking to use this heavy, I don't know, do they call it a mule foot maybe? I don't know, for some reason that term is in my mind, but it holds onto the stamp and gives a much broader point of contact as opposed to just holding it through the center. So I feel like I get much more even stamping whenever I use this tool. Not necessary, but if you're going to be doing a lot of this, I really recommend it. Now also on hand, in addition to your clay in whatever color you'd like to use, I do have a spritz bottle just full of plain water. And I like to wet the surface of my clay. And then we're going to come through. Also, another tool that you can use. Now this one is no longer carried by Tandy Leather, but you may be able to find some used. And this is a Steampunk Craft Aid. And you can see it has a very light kind of ridge poking out that leaves the design. So what we can actually do here is just lay this down on the surface of our clay, and then I burnish it in with my fingertip. And I don't get a very good result just with that. Let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. But I like to come in and use a porcupine quill, or you could use an awl tip or whatever you have, and just deepen that line. And this will give something for our Lumiere paint that we're using to settle into, to really show off the design. And you could also just as easily hand draw whatever you like, but I like having a little bit of a guide. And then you could also use a ball tip stylus tool to come through and add a little bit of contrasting texture to where the gear is. And you could do this for the actual gear, or you could come through and just fill in the background. Though if I were to fill in the background, like over here, I did just the carved area, but if I were to fill in the background, I would kind of want to add in that dappling throughout, or at least mostly in that region, just to give a sense of continuity. And also, you can see on this one, I kind of just did a Mod Podge of just like, just laying some gears down. There is no reason why you couldn't come through and have these stamps line up to where the tooth of one gear is lining up with the tooths of other gears, and that way, you know, kind of make it look like there's a little bit more rhyme and reason beyond just like, throw gears on it and call it steampunk. So I'm going to show you how each of these stamps perform. I really like this one. And the water is so important in keeping this from sticking to your stamps. So just laying that on top. And then pressing, giving it a little bit of a forward and back as well as side to side. Moving that and then lifting that up. And you can see we got a really nice deep impression on that one. And I'm just kind of demonstrating with each of the stamps, but again, forward and back, side to side, lifting it up. And there we are. And now you'll be able to see the 3D versus the tool stamp. Just taking that and kind of pressing around, pulling off. So I mean, it's not bad, but I do like this one better. And honestly, that's probably the best imprint I've ever gotten off of that one. Just saying. Now this one's probably one of my least favorite steampunk stamps because I think it looks more like the steering wheel of a ship than it does in actual gear, but it can give you some really nice variation. Just pressing it in, knocking stuff off my work surface. And so you can kind of see how that imprinted nicely. And also, one of my favorite tools to use, this is called a cedar. It's just a little tip like that, a little bit of a texture around the edge. And I like to take it and press it into the clay. And I feel like it makes it, you know, just a nice little detail. And then I take, this is a small Phillips head screwdriver. And I'm just going to take that and just very lightly, boop, right in the middle of our little cedar bump. And I feel like it makes it look like a little screw head that's been pressed in. And so these are kind of the general techniques and concepts. You kind of just press it in. Now also something that's really cool is you can take, you know, if you get some gears placed and you have some odd empty space, go ahead and feel free to lay, this one works really well for it particularly, lay it on top of your other gears that you've imprinted and then just smush it in. I use quite a bit of force. If you use too much, it will start to cut through your clay, very much like that. But you can take it and kind of smush it back down because it's not baked yet. So, and we're going to be doming it with resin. So again, should be okay, but that is something that I try to avoid. But you can see it leveled out and now we have a cool like overlap look. And so we're just going to keep doing that until we have filled up our sheet of clay to have it be however we like. And now I'm going to go through and use these 3 colors. And you can use whatever you like, but I like Sunset Gold, Pewter, and the Halo Violet Gold. The halo effects have such a cool, like, they're my favorite to work with. But I really like using these other colors for adding in just some variation. And so I'm actually going to just squeeze some of this onto my fingertip. And then use it to kind of blot and dab and dry brush in here on our clay surface. So I'm very much finger painting with it, but I want to try to get some down into the nooks and crannies and crevices. You could use a paintbrush if you like, but I end up getting just as messy whether I use a paintbrush or my hand. So I've learned to just save myself the trouble in the paintbrush and just get my hands dirty right from the get-go. So just blotting and blotting that in. Bring the tripod down just a hair so you can keep seeing. And someone had commented on one of my videos the other day, they're like, man, I've been watching you for years and you've gotten way better at staying in frame. And I'm like, don't jinx me. But I have gotten a little better, hopefully. I'm still not where I'd like to be, but wiping just a bit of it off, shaking it up, and getting some of this Sunset Gold, which I think is just beautiful. I love this color. It's super vibrant. It blends well with a lot of other colors. I'm just kind of splotching that in. Now, something else that you could use that gets a really interesting effect would be just mica powders. And you could, still using your finger, just burnish over the surface. It would make it look kind of, you know, really highlight the higher textures in your work. So using very similar tools and sister techniques, you can really get a lot of different effects here. Okay, so now this next one is where I am going to use a paintbrush, and I'm just going to shake so I get a little bit in the cap. Clean up my paint, which I do want to share with you guys just how pretty a lot of this stuff ends up being, even just in the paint cup. I could just watch that for a hot minute. Okay, that's enough of staring into the depths of the paint water. And so just getting some there on our paintbrush and really kind of globbing this stuff on. And sometimes I'll, like, you know, use strokes of paint to apply it, but most of the time I like to just kind of glob it. So it's more of an art than a science, that's for sure. But just do however you feel compelled. I like to let it settle. And I want to get a lot of that purple pigment in there, because these halo paints have a really interesting effect that we're going to go through and spritz water on it. And that gives it like just a super cool, like the purple pigment will actually separate from the gold mica that's kind of floating around in there, and give us just some wicked cool effects. I try to not cross-contaminate too much, but I'm a messy artist. So you're at your own craft bench. You do you. Oh, more pretty mica spirals in our water. Okay, rinsing my brush out, putting the cap back on. So now you can see, you could technically just leave it like this, but I do want you to see how it looks whenever we get some water on there. So I'm actually going to bring our camera in just a little bit more for you, so you can hopefully see without a glare. And so you can see those same little gold pigments, it's going to start running and blending and settling into some of our gears, but it gets a nice separation going. And this is something that is kind of best viewed in time-lapse. We can really see over here how the purple is settling in with the pewter. And it starts to really bring out, the deeper you do your imprints, the more of a distinct separation you'll start to get. But the detail isn't lost on subtlety either. So we're going to let this completely dry. I try to not use a hairdryer on it because it'll do this effect. Just me blowing on it goes like... So you can see it really starts to... And you can get different effects with that, but it pushes the pigment into different directions. And I don't recommend using a heat gun because that can actually start to bake the clay. And we're going to be going through in the next step and cutting this into cabochons. So... I don't necessarily want it to bake at all, but you can really see now how it starts coming out. If you want it to dry faster, I have a protected spot on my front porch where I can lay this in sunlight, and I haven't found that it affects it at all. So, like, I haven't had any discoloration or complications with baking by sunning the polymer clay first. But I am just going to scooch that off to the side. And then... here is one that I had finished earlier, and I used a lot less purple in it. And that's why I decided, I'm like, no, I'm using way more purple. So, this one was just a little, you can see I didn't even, get too creative with it. I just kind of plop, 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 different stamps and stuff. But I really loved the coloring and texturing that it got. And the pewter almost has like a steely blue tinge to it that the camera doesn't really pick up on too much, but I love it. And so now I'm going to go through using just whatever choice of clay cutter you would like to use. I'm currently doing a batch for my Patreon craft crates, and I needed more of this size, which is kind of like a medium size, which I really like because you can capture hints, you know, of it, so you don't get the whole gear, you get like a portion of a gear, and I really liked that. And also, some of y'all who are my patrons and get craft crates monthly, you may actually have gotten one or two of these in some of your craft crates. They can be kind of expensive, but whenever I have extras or duplicates or something, or one that I'm like, you know, I don't use this very much, but somebody else might, you might find one in your craft crate. And I also send out tools like this also. But, so we're just going to take it and place our cutter and then just press. Now you could put a piece of plastic over this and you'll lay this on over an uncut piece of clay, like another, just double up on the thickness, put plastic over it and press down, and that'll give you a domed cabochon. But I'm going to be doming these with resin. And the reason why I prefer to do that is not only does it use less clay, so it's a lighter, like more lightweight piece, better for earrings and, you know, just lighter jewelry is always nice. But with the Lumiere paints, or even like a mica powder or anything like that, over time this will start to buff off of the surface of the clay. So by putting a very nice protective layer of resin on there, we're making sure that our detail, you know, with that cool color shifting and stuff, isn't getting lost to time. And if you're working on your own, you can be very discriminating about, oh, I really like this part of that one, so I want to capture this spot right here. But I'm trying to not limit myself by my own personal preference. So most of the time, I'll just do a big sheet like this and then kind of methodically go through and just ignore the pattern and just cut out one next to another, just trying to get as many as possible out of a sheet, really. But also, I end up getting some results that I'm like, whoa, I could have never planned that, you know? So, just giving myself up to the process of it. Sorry, I don't want to be yelling into the camera's microphone. Let me shift that around. Now also, some problems that I have run into whenever I use a very thick layer of clay is sometimes this Lumiere paint, you can see it actually overhung just a little bit right here, would peel up. So I try to make sure that I remove the cabochons in a way that if it peels up, it peels from the clay that's left on the table as opposed to the clay that is on the cabochon, if that makes sense. But yeah, like that's like super cool. Like I really enjoy these, and they're definitely very replicable. You could actually go through before baking and add some little like gears and sprockets and things, which I may actually do that. Like that would be a lot of fun. Where is my tray with gears and sprockets and stuff? But here we have some different examples. Like these might be pretty cool to incorporate. Though that's not exactly what I was thinking. Like I'd gotten on Amazon, I think actually. I'll try to link it if I can. Where are you? Is that you? No. Oh no. It is lost to the depths of the craft room, I think. There it is. Okay. On Amazon, I'd gotten like a whole bin of watch parts, like real, genuine watch parts that I kind of picked through and tried to sort and stuff. But you could take little, you know, gears, even just like that one, would work nicely, but I'm going to pick ones that still have the little spine in them. Because you can see this one has that little bit of a needle poking through. Because whenever we cover it with the resin, that won't bother us. I try to use the ones that I've already removed the little pokey thing out of for my wire wrapping pieces. It's easier with a pair of tweezers for sure, but so there's another one. That'll be pretty cool. Okay, but yeah, so you can see, so that's some of the different stuff that I have from all sorts of places. Yeah, like every time I'm like, oh man, I'm glad I saved this. I'm like, haha, hoarding for the win. Okay, zooming in a bit. Now we could come and we could take this and layer it in over anywhere, really. And since these are actual metal, they bake really nicely. So I'm just going to kind of push that down and in. And then I think I'm going to take this one and push it down and in. So I mean, very subtle, but they're there. And it just adds a whole nother layer of detail to the piece. And so I would go through and continue, you know, cut out just a whole sheet, but we don't have to do that on camera together. And then I am going to put these into a cold oven at 275 degrees. Well, if you're using Cato or Cernit or Primo or Fimo, be sure to read the manufacturer's instructions. These are Primo Sculpey, so I'm doing them at 275, but almost regardless of what brand I use, if it's a dark color clay, I go ahead and just bake the heck out of it, like for about 45 minutes. But that's just my oven too. It does not heat evenly. It is not a very good oven. Just overuse maybe. But I'm going to bake it at 275 for 45 minutes. You know, keep an eye on your own oven and see. And if it's a lighter color, I usually keep a much closer eye and kind of check every 10 minutes or so to make sure that my pieces aren't burning. And then I'll meet you guys here for the next step. So I'm here and they have been baked. You can see I just have them on the back of a silicone mold, just something to keep them from sticking. And I'm going to be using this UV resin. Pretty sure I already said this, but the link to this will be down in the video description below. I really like this one because the price point is right and it seems to have pretty good results. And so I'm just kind of carefully coming through and doming. You want to be careful where it comes to like a, a dip in the edging, because then it'll have a tendency to want to kind of slide off. And I'm just using the tip to kind of guide around, being real careful. I don't want to get any bubbles in here if I don't have to. There we go. Now I am wearing a respirator because this stuff does smell pretty strongly. And just anytime I'm working with something and there's any kind of smell, I just go ahead and throw on my respirator. It's better to not risk it. Okay, so I'm just going to do that one, and then I'm going to pop it over here into our UV lamp. Here you can see I've just slid it right in, and we have it going, just the one. Now it's on a timer, and that's great because it keeps me from leaving the light on whenever I leave the room. But I'm going to leave it for about just one rotation, about 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then I'm going to go through and do the other tabs. But and then I'm going to put them all in again for like, a full minute or something, just for good measure. And I just use some rubbing alcohol to remove any tackiness that might be there. This is an older project that you just wiped it down with alcohol, and that seems to work. And then I also have, sorry for my messy little craft closet, this one here that we just finished doing using PBO paints and UV resin, which is a lot of fun, but it has some two little bubbles in the surface. So I think I'm going to do another layer and try to cover that up and see how that works. But that's a different project altogether. If you guys are interested in a tutorial on this, though, be sure to leave a comment down below, because I think that's a pretty cool effect. So I've completed one layer, and I'm going to go ahead and go through, because you can see we got a little bit of pulling away from the edge there on that one, and a little bit of dimpling over the gears that we had added on the one in the far top left. So I'm just going to go through and touch up. Now I found that I can't do too many layers of doming. Whenever I do, I need to start pulling it in, you know, closer and closer in each layer from the edge. But second layer, we should be okay going all the way to the edge. And if you're a little iffy about it, just get it on there and then pop it right back into the lamp to let it set up for a minute. Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me for this tutorial. I went ahead and domed them with UV resin, if they'll focus at all. There we go. So there's one. I really like this one. This one was done with a whole bunch of purple in it. And I may post some of these up on my Etsy for sale, but they'll definitely be going out to my patrons. So this one is one of the Celtic Knot stamped pieces, which I really just love. Love, love, love. This is the one that we put the little gears into, which I really like the dimension and depth that one got. And you don't have to use a two-part or a UV resin. You could use a two-part epoxy resin like Art and Glow or Clearcast 7000 or my favorite art resin. And then also you could always just dome the surface with some Mod Podge Dimensional Magic. There we go. And that's just, I really love the way that they do the surface up. And most of the time I do prefer to use a two-part doming resin. Be sure that it's one that is self-doming though, because otherwise it'll just run right off the edges. But I really like using those because I feel like, I don't know, I can get more of them done kind of in a sitting as opposed to like doming one and putting it into the UV lamp and then doming one and then putting them into the UV lamp. And for on my Patreon and my Etsy, as well as our own inventory, I'll often do a couple hundred cabochons at a time, or as much as I have table space for. But if you guys have any questions, comments, or ideas, I would really love to hear from you. So please leave a comment down below. Like, share, and subscribe if you're into what I'm doing and would like to see more, future tutorials like this one. Also, if you enjoy my free tutorials and would like to support the creation of more of them, please check me out on Patreon. Again, there'll be links down below. And I try to post every day, but that doesn't always happen. But I post all sorts of stuff that can be viewed even if you aren't a pledger. You just have to have a Patreon account to be able to comment and interact and post pictures of your work. And then the more you pledge, the more that you get. So you'll be able to participate in my weekly giveaways, my digital download content, my fairy house giveaways, and all of the different things that we do here at the craft crates. You know, that way you can get your hands on some cabochons for a pretty good deal. And yeah, just all sorts of different stuff over there. And that's, y'all have really made it, and I feel like I say this in every single video, but I feel like I don't say it enough, and that is you guys make such a huge difference for Randy and I. So, oh, he's my partner. Do you want to say hey, Randy?
Hey, Randy.
It's my Randy. But you guys have made a huge difference for us, so thank you so much for spending your time with me. And until our next video, happy crafting, y'all. Bye.